This is her mansion in Irvington, New York. Most people never get to step inside. Tonight you will. A guide's voice echoes through a grand, aging estate. Another camera crew rolls slowly up a long, sloping driveway in Georgia toward a lonely ranch house that once belonged to the godfather of soul. Across thousands of miles in America, scattered over hills, riversides, and suburbs, stand vast mansions once owned by legendary black icons. They were built as proof of survival, steel and stone statements that said, "I made it." Now many of them sit half-empty, paint-peeling roofs sagging, auctioned off for a single dollar, waiting for buyers who never come. And yet, according to caretakers, visitors, and night guards, something inside these houses refuses to leave. People describe spectral figures hovering in hallways, distorted sounds leaking out of old photographs, wooden rocking chairs that move on their own in dust-choked rooms, shifting with a frantic rhythm, as if pushed by a force no one can see. So what exactly is the horror that lingers behind these expensive front doors? Tonight we walk through 17 haunted homes of black icons, places where some believe the spirits of their owners still wander, trying to finish stories that were cut short. Villa Lewaro, The Wrath in the Herbal Air, Irvington, New York. From the road, Villa Lewaro looks like a monument, not a ghost story. The 34-room estate sits high above the Hudson River, a neoclassical manor with sweeping terraces and tall columns once celebrated as proof that a black woman could build an empire in a country that tried to deny her. This was the home of Madam C. J. Walker, remembered as the first black self-made female millionaire. On paper, Villa Lewaro is simply historic architecture. In person, people say it feels more like a throne room that never fully surrendered its queen. According to restoration workers who have spent long solitary hours there, the house does not like to be treated casually. One artifact specialist later described standing alone in Madam Walker's bedroom at twilight. As the last sunlight vanished, the air in the room reportedly changed. It grew heavier, denser, as if the space itself were pushing in on his chest. He said his ribcage felt squeezed not by panic, but by something pressing from the outside. Then came the second wave. Witnesses claim a blast of hot, almost feverish air swept across the back of his neck, carrying a strong, unmistakable scent, rich herbal oils, the same kind associated with Madam Walker's famous hair products. The smell didn't drift. It hit sharp, focused, overwhelming, like standing too close to an open bottle. To him it felt like a warning, the presence of a woman who had fought her way into American history and was not interested in being treated like a museum label. Workers say the house operates by its own quiet rules. Maintenance staff have claimed that if anyone swears loudly, laughs disrespectfully, or treats the rooms like a playground, the heavy wooden doors, dark as coffin lids, slam shut at the same instant, though no one is there to push them. On full moon nights, security footage is said to show blurred streaks of light moving across hallways, forming the outline of a tall woman. Guards report hearing what sounds like silk skirts brushing across the floor, pacing steadily from room to room. To believers, that is not wind. That is a matriarch making rounds, still guarding the empire she built, still watching every intruder who thinks they have a right to walk through her home. The Beach Island Mansion, the Christmas Eve dirge, South Carolina. Deep in the woods near Beach Island, South Carolina, another house sits under trees that look skeletal after sunset. This was the private fortress of James Brown, the godfather of soul, a single-story ranch spread across roughly 80 acres of land. Here, away from arenas and stage lights, he spent his final days. On Christmas Day 2006, he died in a hospital, and the property fell into legal battles, neglect, and silence. But people who have stepped through its doors say silence is not the right word. The center of the story is a withered Christmas tree still standing in a corner of the living room. The power to the house has long been disconnected. Yet several photographers and trespassers have claimed that at the stroke of midnight, a strange blue light flickers to life along the dead string of bulbs wrapping the tree. Not warm holiday light, something colder, unearthly, like a faint electric glow. Under that pale shimmer, dust-covered furniture reportedly takes on a washed-out ghostly tone, as if time itself froze on the day James Brown's life stopped. From the basement where he once recorded and rehearsed, some visitors say they've heard heavy thuds against the floor like fists pounding through wood. Others describe the sound as frantic clawing, as if someone were trying to escape a sealed room below. Over those noises, there are stories of faint, strained vocal sounds, like a voice trying to climb toward one last high note before breaking into a harsh gasp. It doesn't play like a song. It plays like a memory replaying itself, badly warped. To outsiders, the Beach Island estate is just an empty property caught in legal limbo. To those who believe in what they hear after midnight, it is a loop that never ends, a Christmas that never finishes, a rhythm that never resolves, a house replaying the final exhaustion of a man who gave everything to performance and left without peace. Hancock Park Mansion, the veiled breath of Nat King Cole, Los Angeles. In the quiet, wealthy neighborhood of Hancock Park, in Los Angeles, one Tudor-style house looks like it belongs on a postcard, manicured lawn, classic lines, old Hollywood charm. Nat King Cole bought this house hoping for sanctuary. Instead, he faced neighbors who reportedly tried to keep him out because he was black. Inside, he battled the cigarette smoke that eventually led to his death from lung cancer in 1965. Decades later, the house still stands renovated and modernized. But visitors describe something that doesn't match the fresh paint. People entering the main foyer talk about a gray haze hanging in the air, even when no one has smoked there for years. According to several accounts, the mist doesn't drift or thin out the way normal smoke does. It lingers in place, carrying a stale smell of tobacco mixed with something much colder like damp stone or soil. Some visitors say that as they walk through this area, their throats tighten. A few have described the unnerving sensation of invisible fingers closing around their windpipe, not violently enough to injure, but enough to make them cough or step back, desperate to breathe more clearly. Skeptics call it suggestion. Believers call it a replay of Nat King Cole's final struggle for breath, etched into the air of the place where he lived through so much pressure, respect, resentment, and smoke. Neverland Ranch, Michael Jackson's Sleepless Shadow, California. Everyone remembers the billboard version of Neverland, a fantasy estate in California, complete with amusement rides, statues, lush gardens, and a main house large enough to swallow most people's homes whole. It was built as Michael Jackson's refuge, a private kingdom where childhood could be reimagined. But by the time he left this world in 2009, that kingdom had become a symbol of lawsuits, obsessions, and a life lived under unrelenting scrutiny. The rides are still. The music has stopped. Yet, according to security personnel and occasional workers, the property has never truly gone quiet. Inside the main manor, security cameras reportedly have captured a slim, solitary shadow gliding past doorways late at night, moving in a way that looks disturbingly familiar, quick footwork, a smooth slide, a pivot that echoes the most famous dance moves on earth. In some accounts, the figure appears to walk straight through solid walls, not performing for an audience, but drifting without direction, like someone rehearsing steps in a place where no applause remains. Out by the old amusement grounds, the real rides are rusted and unmoving. But people who have walked there at night say that small music boxes sometimes start on their own. The melodies begin normally gentle and nostalgic. Then, according to witnesses, the tempo suddenly speeds up. The notes warp, bend, and twist until the sound becomes thin, high, and eerie, more like a cry than a song. Those who have patrolled the grounds at night often talk about the sensation of being watched from every angle. When they turn around, nothing moves except the bronze statues of children scattered through the garden. Some guards insist that when they glance back a second time, a statue's head or arm seems to be angled differently, as if it had shifted while no one was looking. To critics, it's imagination. To others, Neverland is a place suspended between childhood fantasy and adult reality, between joy and exhaustion, too charged to ever truly go still. And for those who believe the presence that glides through its hallways at 3 a.m. is not there to perform, it's there because even in death rest never really arrived. El Palacio Apartment, Dorothy Dandridge's Solitary Rose, West Hollywood. Some sorrows sink so deep that even death can't smooth them out. They stay behind like stains in the walls. At the El Palacio Apartments in West Hollywood, one modest unit holds the memory of a woman Hollywood once called radiant, then abandoned without mercy. Dorothy Dandridge, the first black woman nominated for an Oscar for Best Actress, spent her final days here in 1965, broke, isolated, and exhausted. The apartment has been repainted, refurnished, and re-rented. But residents say the atmosphere never changed. They describe the space as a time capsule, soaked in melancholy, as if every surface remembers the weight of her last hours. One of the strangest recurring reports involves the bathroom. Tenants claim that although the faucets are completely dry and the pipes shut off for inspection, the mirror will suddenly fog over as if someone just stepped out of a scalding shower. From behind that mist, people say they've seen a face slowly emerge. Dorothy's face still beautiful but strained, hollow, and exhausted. Her eyes appear rolled slightly upward, not meeting yours, as if locked on something far beyond the room. Witnesses describe it as less a jump scare and more an accusation, a silent question about how a life so celebrated could be allowed to end in such loneliness. Others have reported waking to find long, slender strands of jet-black hair coiled tightly around their bedposts, chilled by the sensation that someone had been sitting at the edge of the bed while they slept, trying to cling to one last trace of warmth. When the clock hits exactly 2:00 a.m., several tenants claim the air inside the apartment grows dense, the temperature dropping without explanation. From deep within the old wooden walls, they hear what sounds like fingernails scraping rapid, dry, desperate. Mixed with that scratching, some say they've heard faint, stifled sobs that never quite turn into full cries, dissolving back into silence before anyone can locate the source. To the outside world, Dorothy Dandridge is a photograph in a history book. Inside that small apartment, she is a presence that refuses to let her final chapter be forgotten. Outer Drive Mansion, Marvin Gaye's unfinished plea, Detroit. Some houses can't scrub away blood no matter how many times they're repainted. On Outer Drive in Detroit stands a house eternally linked to one of music's darkest days, the home where Marvin Gaye was shot and killed by his own father in April 1984. Renovations have come and gone. New owners have tried to reclaim the space, but visitors still talk about a chill that never leaves. A neighbor who passes by at dusk every year on the anniversary of Marvin's death told of a recurring horror. As they walk past the house, they say a sudden wave of metallic scent hits them out of nowhere, the unmistakable odor of fresh blood, sharp enough to claw at the back of the throat. No visible source, no wound, no spill, just a smell that seems to seep out of the very wood. Inside, one visitor once described sitting in the quiet living room when vinyl records suddenly slid from the shelf and clattered to the floor. Without anyone touching it, the turntable came to life. But instead of familiar songs like What's Going On, the speakers reportedly emitted only a raspy, distorted voice, Marvin's tone twisted into gasping pleas, as if begging for breath, begging for time, begging for mercy that never came. Then came the shadow. On the wall near the hallway to the bedroom, a silhouette appeared. Witnesses say it didn't move, didn't flicker like a trick of the light. It simply formed the outline of a man holding a gun frozen in place. A former housekeeper later said that on the darkest nights, the house seems to replay arguments that no one can see. Voices rise behind closed doors. Footsteps slam across the hallway. Then, in the middle of the chaos, comes a sudden, imaginary gunshot, heard only by those inside, echoing louder than any real sound should. The bullet that ended Marvin Gaye's life didn't just stop a heartbeat. For those who believe it, cursed the house, trapping a broken family dynamic in its walls, forcing the building to relive that betrayal again and again. Whitney Houston Estate, the chill of the fatal Bath, New Jersey. From the outside, Whitney Houston's former estate in Mendham Township, New Jersey, looks like a dream carved in stone marble floors, sweeping staircases, and long corridors lined with polished wood and velvet. To some, it's just another luxury property. To others it is a mausoleum, beautiful but empty, and cold, soaked in the agony of a dynasty that couldn't escape its own weight. An elderly caretaker, one of the few who has walked those halls, night after night, has described what happens when the New Jersey fog rolls in and swallows the surrounding hills. On those nights, he says, the house feels less like a home and more like a sealed vault. From behind the locked door of the master bedroom, where the bathtub stands dry and unused, he claims to have heard water suddenly erupting, surging as if the tub had been filled and overflowed in a matter of seconds. Following the sound with a flashlight, he says he once watched in stunned horror as wet footprints formed on the carpet outside the bathroom. They appeared one after another, dark sodden impressions that trailed from the unseen tub toward the bed, then stopped at its edge. No dripping pipes. No visible intruder. Just the suggestion of someone who had stepped out of death still searching for warmth. Guests who have stayed on the property talk about being jolted awake by a voice cutting through the empty air, sharp, powerful, unmistakable. For a moment they think they're hearing Whitney singing again, the voice that once filled stadiums. But as they listen, the sound shifts. Notes warp. The melody twists into a wet, choking gurgle, as though someone is trying to sing while being dragged underwater. The sound stops abruptly, leaving the listener alone with their own racing pulse. The most disturbing accounts come from security personnel who say they felt a drenched, freezing hand clamp down on their shoulder from behind. The grip is described as violent, insistent, and inescapable. Those who have felt it swear they walked away with the overwhelming sensation of ice-cold water seeping into their clothes as if they were being pulled toward the bottom of a tub where a legendary voice was silenced forever. Los Feliz Mansion, Sam Cooke's scream of despair, Los Angeles. In Los Angeles' Los Feliz neighborhood, there is an estate that looks like it belongs to a forgotten European hillside, grand, old, and quiet. But for those who believe the silence inside that house is not peace. It's pressure. This is the home tied in whispers and rumors to the restless spirit of Sam Cooke, whose death in 1964 has long been surrounded by suspicion and unanswered questions. A mechanic once working late at the property claimed that at midnight, as he stood alone in the hallway, he saw something dark seep out from beneath a closed bedroom door. It wasn't water. It wasn't oil. He described it as a thick, dark fluid that spread across the floor toward his boots, carrying with it the sharp, unmistakable scent of iron-like fresh blood. As he reached to touch it, it evaporated into nothing, leaving behind only the smell and a pounding heartbeat in his ears. The sound system in the house has been known to switch on without warning. Instead of playing the smooth, uplifting sound of a change, is gonna come people inside report hearing ragged breathing and heavy footsteps like someone running, stumbling, trying to outrun something in the dark. One night, God swore he saw a muscular silhouette materialize in the middle of the walkway. The figure appeared nude, its chest marked by gaping black wounds where bullets might have torn through. In the same instant, a scream ripped through the empty hallway. She shot me. The sound crashed against the walls like thunder, followed by a loud impact, as if a body had slammed into wood and slid to the floor. Visitors looking out the window at night have reported another sight. Instead of the calm view over the valley, they claim they've seen a bloody handprint dragging itself down the glass from the inside, leaving streaks that fade as quickly as they appear. To those who believe this house is not just haunted, it is a reenactment chamber, a place where a man's final confusion and horror play back in fragments, still waiting for the justice that never came. Aretha Franklin Estate, the Cathedral of Spectres, Detroit. When Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, died in 2018, many assumed her story ended in glory, surrounded by respect, by accolades, by love. But the disputes over her estate, the arguments, the contested wills, the tug-of-war over money and legacy cast a shadow over the Detroit home she left behind. Some say those arguments woke something up. Inside the living room sits her beloved Steinway piano, once the instrument of Sunday afternoons, recording sessions and private rehearsals. Now, according to members of an asset management team, it has become the center of something far darker. One worker claimed that on Easter Sunday, as they walked past the piano, a thick black tar-like fluid began to ooze from between the ivory keys. The smell, they said, was unbearable rotting sweetness, mixed with decay like something that had died under the floorboards. Whenever anyone in the house speaks too loudly about the will, the money, or the estate, several witnesses report the same reaction: a low guttural growl, tearing through the air, followed by a sudden blast of freezing wind that leaves the room brutally cold, as if someone has just walked straight through the group and out the other side. Infrared cameras set up in the private chapel on the property have reportedly shown something even more disturbing. In the footage, pews that appear empty to the naked eye suddenly fill with blurred, faceless figures when viewed through night vision lenses. They sit perfectly still, row after row, like a ghostly congregation attending a service without end. To those who believe this is Aretha's last show of authority, a woman who spent her life commanding rooms, now filling her own chapel with spirits to guard the peace she was denied in death by the greed of the living. Louis Armstrong House, The Broken Cadence, Queens, New York. On a quiet street in Queens, New York, stands a modest brick house that once held the laughter, music, and warmth of Louis Armstrong, a man whose trumpet helped define American sound. He died here after a heart attack, and visitors say the house has never quite let go of that final moment. In the narrow hallways, staff and guests have talked about hearing distant trumpet notes from the attic, long, piercing, and warped. The sound is not joyful or smooth. It is strained like a siren, chopped in half a melody that keeps getting cut short just before it finds its rhythm. A curator once claimed that the emotional charge in certain rooms is so strong that glass display cases have shattered without anyone touching them. Just a loud crack and then shards everywhere, as if something had pushed outward from the inside. In the room where Louis is believed to have taken his last breath, visitors describe an unmistakable sensation. His old armchair starts to rock back and forth violently, empty, creaking on its own, while the sound of harsh, labored breathing fills the air. Others say that when they stand too close to his personal belongings, trumpets, photographs, handwritten notes, they feel a hand clamp onto their wrist. Ice cold, firm, dragging, not enough to bruise but enough to send a message. To them it feels like Louis Armstrong's spirit is still trying to share his last terrifying seconds, the panic, the chest pain, the feeling of a body failing, while the mind still reaches for one more note in the dark. Ray Charles Estate, The Labyrinth of Shadows, Beverly Hills. Ray Charles spent a lifetime guiding people through darkness with his music. Inside his Beverly Hills estate, the darkness seems to have learned to move on its own. What was once a luxury sanctuary now feels to many who enter like a living trap. The quiet there is not peaceful. It is watchful. Visitors have reported feeling an invisible force shove past them in the hallway, as if something unseen is rushing through the house and refuses to be blocked. They describe the air turning suddenly icy, their bodies knocked off balance for a second, even though no one is physically there. The walls themselves hold another secret. This house was designed with special ridges and rails to guide a blind man safely from room to room. According to staff, those guiding lines seem to shift. One moment they lead toward an exit, the next they curve into dead ends. People who try to walk through in complete darkness, trusting their hands instead of their eyes, claim they suddenly find themselves looping back to the same spot over and over again, as if the house is rearranging itself to keep them inside. On certain nights, some say they've seen what looks like a pair of eyes, glowing faint blue in the shadows, sightless but fixed on whoever stands in the room. Not eyes that see furniture or walls, but eyes that feel like they're seeing through you, judging what you bring into this house: respect, greed, or curiosity. To those who believe Ray's estate has become a maze built from memory and anger, a place where the path out is never as simple as the path in. Sammy Davis Jr. Estate, The Final Curtain That Never Falls, Beverly Hills. Sammy Davis Jr. was once described as the greatest entertainer alive, a man who could sing, dance, joke, and command any stage he stepped onto. But his Beverly Hills estate feels less like a monument and more like a theater where the show refuses to end. At night, staff report hearing the steady clack, clack, clack of tap shoes at the base of the grand staircase. The sound starts softly, then grows louder, as if someone is rehearsing in the dark. When lights are flipped on the steps, stop instantly, leaving only the echo in the listener's chest. In the ballroom where parties once spilled late into the night, people have heard the clink of glasses that aren't there, followed by the sharp crack of breaking crystal, like 1,000 shards hitting the floor at once. Yet when they rush to look, nothing is broken. The air often smells faintly of old whiskey and cigar smoke even after thorough cleanings. On some nights that scent thickens into a haze, low to the floor, making it harder to see the exits clearly. Witnesses have described a voice sliding out of the dark behind them, raspy, tired, yet unmistakably theatrical. "The show is over," it whispers, "but I can't leave." To them, this doesn't feel like a jump scare. It feels like a man trapped in a role he can't step out of, forever stuck between the end of the performance and the final curtain call that never truly arrives. Maya Angelou Villa, The Unfinished Manuscript, North Carolina. Maya Angelou's voice gave the world language for pain and resilience. In her Winston-Salem home, some believe that voice is still working. Behind the locked doors of her library, people have reported hearing the steady clack of typewriter keys, slow, deliberate, rhythmic, as if someone is still drafting lines in the dark. There is no typewriter there now. The sound continues anyway. Those who have entered the room at the wrong moment describe an unnerving sight: sheets of paper lifting off desks and shelves in a sudden gust that has no clear source. The pages swirl in the air, circling the room like a white storm, then settle quietly back down blank, as if nothing was ever written. In the middle of that chaos, some say they've heard a voice, deep, commanding, and echoing, as if it's coming from the center of the house, rather than from any single corner. The words are simple and heavy. "I am not finished. Do not leave." A few visitors claim that right after hearing this, they felt a hand rest on their shoulder, ice cold, unmoving, not pushing, but holding them in place. They describe it not as a threat, but as a demand. A command to stay, to witness, to help finish a story that refuses to end on the last published page. Cherry Hill Villa, The Knockout from the Shadows, Muhammad Ali, New Jersey. Cherry Hill, New Jersey once served as a training ground and refuge for Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion who turned boxing into poetry. This estate was where he prepared his body for battle and fought his quiet war with Parkinson's. Now, its basement gym is at the center of a legend that refuses to calm down. Security guards have reported that in the middle of the night, from below the main floor, they begin to hear it. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of fists hitting a heavy bag. No music, no voice, just impact. The floorboards above tremble with every hit, as if the energy behind each punch is strong enough to shake the entire house. When guards rush down the stairs with flashlights, the gym appears empty except for punching bags, still swinging wildly as though they've just absorbed a storm of blows. One guard claimed that, when he stepped inside the gym, all the light seemed to drain out of the room at once. He described seeing a towering shadow at the far end, a figure too large to be natural, filling the space like a moving wall. He heard heavy, labored breathing right next to his ear. Not a calm inhale and exhale, but the ragged sound of someone who is exhausted and still refusing to quit. Then suddenly the breath stopped. For him, that silence was worse than the noise. It felt like the moment just before a punch you never see coming. In that underground room, some say Ali's willpower still refuses to stay buried, the spirit of a man who would rather fight an invisible opponent forever than concede the final round. 15. Richard Pryor Villa, The Silent Fury, California. Richard Pryor, a king of comedy, spent his last years in a body shut down by multiple sclerosis, a mind still sharp trapped inside a weakening frame. His California villa now carries a reputation for rage without words. In the dead of night, staff have heard the sudden whir of an electric wheelchair jolting to life, even though no one is sitting in it. The motors roar down empty hallways, wheels squealing against polished floors, racing toward doors that slam hard under impact. The collisions echo through the house, a series of dull shocks that feel less like random motion and more like someone trying to break through a barrier they cannot see. Security cameras, according to those who've reviewed the footage, have captured something even stranger. In the middle of the night, every television in the house has been seen turning on at the same time, flickering with static instead of programs. In that gray haze, some claim they hear a laugh rise from the speakers, Pryor's unmistakable laugh, only distorted, stretched thin and twisted into something that sounds closer to a scream. In one reported incident, the wheelchair rolled down the corridor, then stopped directly in front of a security camera and remained there, unmoving, as if facing the lens on purpose. Those who watched the footage later said it felt like being stared at by someone who had used humor to survive his whole life, and now had nothing left but anger at the body and fate that betrayed him. 16. Sugar Hill Apartment, Billie Holiday's Strangled Anthem, New York. Billie Holiday left this world humiliated, sick, under arrest, handcuffed to a hospital bed in 1959. At her old Sugar Hill residence in New York, some say that injustice is still alive in the air. Inside her former bedroom, visitors describe an immediate change the moment they step through the doorway. Their wrists start to ache, as if something cold has closed around them, light but concentrated like metal cuffs pressing into skin. Surveillance cameras have sometimes caught thin wisps of cigarette smoke appearing in the room without anyone present. The smoke hangs in one place instead of drifting, then twists upward into a loose, choking loop like the outline of a hanging rope. At the same time, witnesses say the scent of gardenias, the flower Billie was famous for wearing, suddenly floods the room. It doesn't come lightly. It crashes in so strong that it feels hard to breathe. Looking at the footage, it's easy to dismiss as lighting dust suggestion. But for those who believe, Sugar Hill is no simple apartment. It is a place where Billie Holiday's fight for dignity still refuses to let go, where she forces anyone who enters to feel a fraction of the weight that was chained to her in those final days. 17. Luther Vandross Villa, the Muted Court, Connecticut. Luther Vandross possessed one of the smoothest voices ever recorded, a sound that turned love, heartbreak, and longing into something almost physical. After a devastating stroke left him unable to perform, his Connecticut villa became a quiet place of recovery, then of absence. Today, people say the silence there feels too heavy to be ordinary. At night, according to a longtime housekeeper, the ceiling speakers in the house sometimes activate on their own. No one is at the control panel. No music is selected. Yet a low rumbling sound begins to pour out, not quite a song, not quite noise. It has been described as a drawn-out, muffled moan, like the echo of a voice trapped just outside the range of hearing. The housekeeper once tried to shut it down, running to the basement and switching off every breaker. The sound, he said, kept going. In that moment, it felt as if the entire house were breathing, walls expanding and contracting with a slow, strained rhythm, as if the structure itself were a giant chest, fighting for one more gasp of air. He reported feeling a warm hand tap his shoulder from behind. The touch was gentle, human, unmistakably real. When he turned inches from his face, he didn't see a person. He saw a shadow with sunken eyes and a mouth stretched open in what looked like a silent cry, no sound coming out, only the shape of a voice that had been taken too soon. For those who believe, Luther Vandross's villa is not about fear for its own sake. It is about longing, the ache of a voice built to fill rooms trapped in an echo that can no longer cross the threshold between silence and song. In the end, these 17 homes tell one story with many faces. They are not just haunted mansions. They are archives of unresolved pain, unfinished work, and legacies that were twisted, cut short, or consumed by forces their owners never fully controlled. The past in these places does not lie still. It lurks behind drapes, clings to stair rails, and waits in doorways for anyone brave or foolish enough to listen. So if tonight you hear a footstep in an empty hallway or feel a tap on your shoulder when no one is there, ask yourself a different question. Are you being scared for fun, or is some forgotten story simply refusing to be buried? If you found these stories changed the way you see these legends, tell us which one stayed with you the most, and which haunted house you would never dare enter alone. If you know someone whose life or personality mirrors this story, share their name in the comments.